Right, so Anil Arora, can you name one lesson or idea from abroad that's helped you or your colleagues?
Yeah, it was, when we went through in this country the legalization of cannabis, we thought about after legalization, how could we still measure the illegal market? And, some of our innovative folks looked around the world and said, you know what? The solution is in wastewater. And you might go, wastewater? Well, that's interesting because if you can measure the content of THC in the wastewater and you know the geographic area that a water treatment plant serves, we can actually get at the denominator of what is actually being consumed in that area. So if you subtract, if you like, the regulated amount of cannabis that is being put into that area, and you know what the denominator is, the balance is the illegal market. We thought that was quite an innovative way to look at, some of the work being done in Europe and other countries to actually look at the measurement of wastewater in certain areas and adapt it to how we can produce official statistics.
Yes, lovely. Are there bits of innovations from Canada that might be valuable to your peers overseas?
Statistics Canada's got a long history of coming up with standards, whether it's how do you measure environmental accounts, how do you do classification standards for gender, if you like. There are so many areas within which our DNA, if you like, is embedded in standards and processes and systems. Even the early adoption of the internet for census responses, something that I was involved with back in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's something now that many other countries have adapted and used. But one interesting area that we're working on right now, which I think will have, hopefully, some value to the world, is how do you put a value on data? So as we become a data-driven society, just like we have natural resource capital, just like we have human capital, could we see in short order something called data capital, where we actually look at monetizing the value of data? You look at some of the biggest companies out there in the world today, and their biggest asset is data. So how do we get at a better sense of valuing what its true worth is and how it's being traded, both globally as well as domestically?
That's interesting. How can we improve the ways in which senior public officials work with and learn from their peers overseas?
Well, there are so many groups now. I think within the UN, the OECD, the IMF, and so on. And I see that already happening. Actually, we're seeing these different disciplines, if you like, coming together. So this whole notion of data science or the geospatial versus and the statistics kind of areas. And so, the kind of things that we're leading as the high-level group on modernization of official statistics, for example, it's about bringing that diversity of providers and users of data and the kind of expertise together that is actually driving the kinds of insights and the values going forward. So we're seeing it happen, but there are also a number of initiatives. For example, the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. So where you've got the United Nations, essentially the world moving towards a 2030 agenda. I think these kinds of visionary, these kinds of objectives actually start to bring together these disciplines together.
Mhm. And what are the biggest global challenges in the field of statistics over the next few years?
Well, look, it's not just statistics is measuring what's actually happening already out there. And so our ability to actually get ahead of it and measure these trends is, I think, really important. So none of these are particularly new, but I think if you look at, for example, globalization with platforms such as, whether it's ride sharing or whether it's, renting out your apartment or your house, using these kinds of platforms. These are global platforms, where the software is in one, the finances may be in another. These are challenges for economies, challenges for statistical agencies to try and figure out, what is that new relationship between a household sector that might be producing now income at a much greater rate than they did before, and how do you value that, if you like, in the overall kind of system of national accounts and the GDP and so on. Climate change, which has no borders. So how do we actually get at a better sense of how it is that whole system of economic and environmental accounting should be developed and further refined into the future. I mentioned earlier Sustainable Development Goals. Again, another area So in these global kinds of challenges, statistical offices, I think, have one, an obligation, but also an opportunity to come together. We are seeing that under the leadership of United Nations Statistical Commission, the OECD, the IMF, and many, many others who are starting to now bring greater value of data to try and get a sense of these global challenges that we face.
Okay. And finally, what is your favourite book?
Well, the one book that has kind of left an impression on me is something called Against the Gods, and it's by Peter Bernstein, and it's incredible. It charts the it charts the history, if you like, of the role of statistics in society. So it talks about sampling probability, which kind of brought a whole new way of looking at things. And when that happened, the whole risk structure that is used in our economic system today, in our society today, is profoundly changed as a result. Because now you can measure risk, and that enabled people to actually take risk. And so we're on the verge, if you like, of a data revolution. And I think the next generation, or the next really 100 years, are going to be a very exciting opportunity to try and unlock the insights and the talents and the kind of possibilities that data holds for us. And statisticians, I think, who've not always been looked at as the sexiest, if you like, disciplines and to go to, I think is going to play even a much, much more prominent role going forward.
Thank you very much.